Good morning, everyone. My name is Halmar, and today I'll be sharing my thoughts on Snowpiercer episode 202, Smolder to Life. I just absolutely loved Smolder to Life. Unlike the Time of Two Engines, I can say for certain that the hype train isn't what made this episode really good. But please be aware that this review contains spoilers, so if you haven't seen it and care about spoilers, please don't watch this video. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was probably something that was pretty funny, and that was when Leighton and Roche pulled the same trick on Kevin, and that they basically just brought some fresh food to him and basically made him crack. Sort of like how Roche brought the grilled cheese and tomato soup to Leighton to make him work in the first episode. At least it didn't really make him work, but it gave him a little bit of a incentive. It felt very fitting and also a bit ironic. Although I might be reading too much into this, I think it really goes to show that Leighton is slowly becoming a part of the system that he fought to overthrow. First he initiates martial law, and now he's using the same methods of convincing prisoners. This may be just a coincidence, but I think that Leighton may eventually just wind up making Snowpiercer the same way it was before he took over. On the topic of Kevin, I want to talk about the scene that stuck with me most throughout the entire episode, and that was the scene where Kevin committed suicide. This gave me really just an aura that I can't fully put into words. It just showed how evil Mr. Wilford really is, and I really like how they made him uncompassionate towards human life, how he was in the movie. However, I must say I like the style a lot more. Instead of laughing away and making null jokes at it, he just simply stares and smiles, which I feel like is a lot more uncomfortable, I guess you could say. The scene itself was really uncomfortable on so many levels. It was really tense, and it made me wonder what was actually going from the very beginning. At first, I took it at face value, but Mr. Wilford started to strip down, and I almost thought there was going to be a relationship between Kevin and Wilford, since Kevin was supposedly someone who's high value, as said by Ruth, which I took in some sort of sentimental way. But when Mr. Wilford gave Kevin the shaving blade, I only knew this was going to go one of two ways. Either Kevin gives Mr. Wilford a shave, or two, Kevin dies. The scene overall was just incredibly disturbing. I know how they always said that the eye scene with LJ in season 1 was disturbing, but I don't really think that was at all. This was messed up, and if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend that you do, because you wouldn't really understand it unless you actually watched it yourself. And although it was uncomfortable, I think it was still a good scene, I guess you could say. But something that I didn't think was good, or at the very least was a little weak, was the revelation that Josie was still alive. To be honest, I think that her being alive is just a crap excuse to add more conflict between Leighton and Zara. I mean, it doesn't really make that much sense to me. Josie's finger was frozen to the point of shattering when exposed to the air that came from the freeze gun, I guess you'd call it, in the interrogation room. And it only makes sense that she would be frozen all the way through when she was exposed to the outside air for more than 20 seconds. However, dismissing the logistics about it, it does sort of make sense that she's still alive, since Commander Gray was in charge of taking her to Compost, and it would have been more than possible for him to save her, to find out what Melanie was interrogating her for. One little thing that I'm enjoying so far, that's like a little small side story, is that concerning Oswald and LJ. I really wish there was more of it, but it seems like the showrunners just crammed it in wherever they could, but simply ran out of room in the show's runtime. So there's little to examine. There's not much to say. One thing about it is that Alexandra seemed particularly interested in LJ when she finally met Mr. Wilford, but there's not really much to say about that. Of course, I couldn't review this episode without talking about the fact that Earth is warming again. However, I think they made the same mistake as they did when they announced that Wilford was actually alive. They revealed way too much in the trailers and didn't have any meaningful fact at all. I mean, right after season 1, they reveal that Mr. Wilford's alive. They don't leave any mystery for over the season recess. And then they just announce in the trailers that Earth is warming and all that stuff. So, I don't know about this season on that respect, because I feel like they're just revealing too much about it. But that might just be to draw our attention from something else, so there might be something much bigger going on than Mr. Wilford and the Earth warming again. I do sort of like the fast-paced action of the story so far, but I'm afraid they might just do too much in too little time, and the end of the season will just turn out badly because they didn't evenly distribute the story. But like I said, they could be just trying to distract us, and there might be something bigger going on. One last thing that wasn't really that great, in my opinion, isn't really that redeemable, is that of Alexandra's deafening silence in the majority episode. It seemed like a rather cliche thing just to put in place for, like, observing character development, I guess. But The one thing that was kind of okay, but won't count it because I'm not sure if it was actually supposed to happen, was where I assumed that she was supposed to assassinate Leighton. It was a pretty tense scene, but with Kevin's suicide still heavy in my mind, by that point it was really overshadowed. Probably the best scene between Wilfred and Alexandra were when they spoke in some sort of prep room of Big Alice. They seem to have some sort of semi-positive relationship, but I think that obviously that Mr. Wilfred's overbearing on it, and he really just wants Alexandra in the engine as soon as possible for Snowpiercer. However, my biggest fear is that in the end, Wilfred's going to wind up being vulnerable at some point, and his failure hinges on Alexandra turning into Melanie's side, which would be a very cheap turn of events. Overall, the episode was incredibly enjoyable. I liked Ruth's scenes. I liked how Bess actually had to do something with herself instead of just following Leighton around, and I especially liked the part where Wilfred is heading back to Snowpiercer, and it just shows who support him and who doesn't. I like Melanie's expression when she realizes that Wilfred has more support than she does on Snowpiercer, how nearly everyone's cheering him for him, except for the Taylors, of course. They don't cheer for him at all, and that silence is quite deafening. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed this review, and that you also enjoyed the actual episode. I think it was a lot better, I guess you could say. I feel like the first one was good, but I guess I just had a sour first impression with it. And I hope that the next episode like this one exceeds